The veil between life and death is thin in Keshite. Everyone knows that eventually they will have to face the judgment of Anubis. That's a new one. He better make his sleight of hand roll. Ra-Memnon and his people escaped the lightning-blasted Catharan desert and its many dangers. They came to a lush delta, and there they founded the glorious city of Keshite. Here, Ra-Memnon made a deal with the gods, offering allegiance in exchange for divine magic and immortality for the pharaohs of Keshite. Each pharaoh is only chosen by the Phoenix from among the most worthy Keshite citizens. This is the Phoenix Covenant. Powerful forces preserve it, but some seek its destruction. Set is in timeout in Duat, the underworld, as punishment for killing his brother Osiris. He is tasked with keeping the forces of Apep at bay, but Set tires of his confinement. And his agents are always at work. By the way, I'm Mop Hotep, a humble sanitation dusker here in Keshite. Somehow my soul got trapped in my skeletal body. Mind you, keeping Keshite clean is a pretty cool job. I mean, look at the place! Flying obelisk act out the lazy dreams of dead pharaohs, the temples, the monuments, the bathhouses. Oh, and the highly efficient sewer system. Just dump your refuse in the nearest troll hole, and the sewer creatures of the downtown will consume it for you. This place rocks! The scribes of Orthain have provided you with new spells, monsters, species, subclasses, and magic items to support your quest. The architects and builders of Taha created the entire city of Keshite in 3D in the Unreal Engine. 25 million square feet of city, with hundreds of unique buildings for players to explore out of game, and for DMs to show the players where they are in the city. Need a last-minute battle map? Just push a button to strip off the top of the buildings and export a VTT-ready image, complete with the grid. You can even adjust the lighting. Come to the kingdom of Keshite, where ancient Egypt comes alive. The veil between life and death is thin in Keshite. Everyone knows that eventually they will have to face the judgment of Anubis. That's a new one. He better make his sleight of hand roll. Ra-Memnon and his people escaped the lightning-blasted Catharan desert and its many dangers. They came to a lush delta, and there they founded the glorious city of Keshite. Here, Ra-Memnon made a deal with the gods, offering allegiance in exchange for divine magic and immortality for the pharaohs of Keshite. Each pharaoh is only chosen by the Phoenix from among the most worthy Keshite citizens. This is the Phoenix Covenant. Powerful forces preserve it, but some seek its destruction. Set is in timeout in Duat, the underworld, as punishment for killing his brother Osiris. He is tasked with keeping the forces of Apep at bay, but Set tires of his confinement. And his agents are always at work. By the way, I'm Mop Hotep, a humble sanitation dusker here in Keshite. Somehow my soul got trapped in my skeletal body. Mind you, keeping Keshite clean is a pretty cool job. I mean, look at the place! Flying obelisk act out the lazy dreams of dead pharaohs, the temples, the monuments, the bathhouses. Oh, and the highly efficient sewer system. Just dump your refuse in the nearest troll hole, and the sewer creatures of the downtown will consume it for you. This place rocks! The scribes of Orthain have provided you with new spells, monsters, species, subclasses, and magic items to support your quest. The architects and builders of Taha created the entire city.
Greetings, Keshites. Thanks for coming for our final live stream before the conclusion of our Kickstarter. What a wild ride this has been. It's our first Kickstarter. We learned a lot. And we learned a lot from you guys because a lot of you super backers out there kind of showed us some of the errors of our ways, and we have learned those lessons, and we will be applying them for our next Kickstarter, which will probably be for book 2, which will be the adventure campaign book from levels 10 to 15, and then we'll have a third one for levels 15 to 20, which we're already starting on because we know that there can't be a single minute of hesitation between when you complete the campaign for levels 1 to 10. You're going to be immediately wanting to roll into 15 to 20, or we could lose people. So that's a huge objective for us, is to get started with all of that. We also have a lot of playtesters that have volunteered, so DMs out there that are interested in running this whole cloth. We love the fact that we've built it in such a way as you can plunder this material for your home brews, or just place Keshinar as a city somewhere in your world. But the lore is such that it may or may not fit in with the grand scheme of how your universe is architected. But you could certainly just drop in Keshinar as a city. It's absolutely going to be easy to do that. But then if we also have DMs that want to run the whole thing, as is, start to finish, including the big story arc that we've created, which is sort of this beautiful fusion, right, between ancient Egyptian lore, actual canon of ancient Egypt, and the canon that is how the universe is created and how it works together in 5e. And they really fit together in this creepy, interesting way that is a beautiful thing. And then where we do have to divert, where it's more 5e stuff or just our own creation, of course, Dr. Waller will be going through and annotating all the places where this is not Egyptian canon, this is stuff that we made up to make it more fun. But all of that, even the stuff we're making up, is heavily inspired by all those considerations. So today we're going to be talking about the art and how we kind of went about that. It's been a big process. Lady X, who you might have heard as our interviewer on Keshinar Confidential, is actually our art director. We found each other a couple of years ago and have been going through the process of identifying the artists that we want to, well, first of all, creating the style that we wanted, and then finding the artists that can actually work inside of that style. It has been challenging to do that, very challenging. It's a single biggest expense. It's huge investment in the artists. When we started this process, I'll say a little bit about AI. When we started this process, there was no AI, right? So I started doing this over 4 years ago, actually commissioning art, and I've been doing it for 4 solid years, spent north of 6 figures on art. And there wasn't AI, but then I noticed it, but then it kind of came onto the scene, and it was like, whoa, what's this, right? And it started to creep in, because I had one artist in particular that swore up and down that they were not using AI, but then it turns out they were photo bashing AI the entire time. And there weren't AI software detectors, which are notoriously inaccurate anyway. They're kind of worthless, actually, because you can feed up art that's hand-painted stuff that we scanned that it'll say that it could be AI, and stuff that definitely is AI, sometimes it misses. So those detectors are garbage. But what we've done is we've had to rejigger our whole process for how we interact with our artists to make sure that it is all hand-created art. And I saw some discussion in some of the forums and on the Breath Discord about, does this use CG? In other words, computer-generated graphics. The reality is that all of our art is done by hand. And the artists all have different approaches and styles. Like one of our artists, Gianluca, he actually paints it like croche on panel, right? So he hand paints everything that he does, starts with hand sketches and then paints it on panel. Others do it on tablets, like Yulia, and I think most of our other artists, like Darius, who does our monsters, and Ren, I think, who does a lot of our gods and scenes. They are doing it by hand, but they're doing it on tablets. And Yelzi, I know, also our main illustrator, does it on tablets. So it is still hand-drawn. It is not computer-generated in any way, shape, or form. All of our artists have to sign an additional waiver on top of their normal contract, kind of with penalties if they to ensure that they're not using AI. They're also required to submit process videos to show that, I think using Avast as a software for that, to show that, the process creation along the way. Plus, almost all of this art, I start by just doing my kind of horrible sketches. In fact, I wasn't thinking I should have included some of those crappy drawings in here.
You shouldn't.
And I shouldn't. Yeah, Nick's saying no, I shouldn't because they're horrible, and he's right, they're really bad. But you know, so they kind of show what we're looking for, what we're trying to get to, and then from there they create different, you know, possibilities, like 1, 2, 3 types of you know, which one would you like, and then we pick one and we kind of move from there. And not everything works out well, and we have to dump it, but other things, you know, we do well. And all the names of the artists and links to their portfolios is going to be posted in the description of this video. So I may not get the last names of everybody right, because we've used a lot. I think we have engaged something like 30 or 40 artists in this project. It's a lot. And some of them have done nothing more than different cats, you know, for like page flair. And you know, we've just kind of picked and choose and built a cadre of artists that really represent the style that we're looking for. So with that having been said, here's our first slide. I'm going to flip over the slides now, Nick. And this is, first I'm going to show you ancient Egyptian art, because obviously this is what we're trying to take inspiration from. So this is a hieroglyph that we found. I think it's in the mortuary temple of Keshite, and it is a really important one because, and I might be wrong about where this was taken, because it was kind of a whirlwind tour. We're there for 3 weeks, right, in December. And that is the hieroglyph for the Reth. And the Reth means the people. And it is taken from a lapwing bird. And the lapwing bird is kind of how they saw themselves as the people, like in this flock, you know, this, you know, collaborative unit of individuals that also could fly, you know. And so it's interesting how they perceive themselves. And so that, I found that really important. So that's a good place to start. That's us. That's the Reth. Now, these are all taken from various wall art in the Valley of the Kings. And first of all, the colors are stunning. This is like thousands and like 3,500-year-old art. But it's in some cases even older, because it's, you know, like it's been 5,000 years since some of their earlier depictions of this stuff. And look how stunningly beautiful it is. And I think this one is, you know, they covered it all in protective, you know, transparent sheeting of some kind, glass or plastic, to keep people from touching it, which is a really good idea. Anubis shows up everywhere. Look how stunning the coloration is on this. And there's some very specific things about Egyptian art that is stuff that we tried to sort of carry through some of the time. We were kind of attempting to do this for all of our art and decided it wasn't appropriate for all of it. So, but I'll show you where we have gone to the trouble of actually trying to copy this style, and then where we've diverted. I just notice all the Cebu stars, the stars of the you know, in the heavens, like so many of these tombs on the ceiling. What? Go faster?
No, we have to go through some of this to get to the artwork thing.
Yeah, I know. It's okay. You're doing good.
Sorry.
And then here it is, you know, same deal, but in the, you know, carved into the stone and hieroglyphics, but it's also maintaining a lot of the same elements, which I'm about to point out, which are really interesting. So go ahead to the next one. Yeah, there's a little Anubis there, which I love. Oh, this is, of course, the Bennu bird. The Bennu bird is the inspiration for the phoenix. And because people think the phoenix is Greek, it's not. It started with the Bennu Egyptian. So the first cry ever heard in the creation of the universe was the Bennu, and the last thing you'll hear is the Bennu bird. And all of these concepts are deeply woven into the Ordatu lore, the Orthain Duat-Aru lore. Go ahead. All right, so here's the thing. So you look at this character, right, and this is true of all of them, and they maintained this style for a really long time. Now, I'm obviously no expert in ancient Egyptian art. What I've learned from Jill and what I've learned from my own reading and learned from Jordan in our own research. But you notice that, first of all, they're always pointing in a direction, right? So she's pointing in a direction. But you can see her whole eye. So if it was a true profile, then you would only see part of my eye, right? But it's like the eye has been rotated around to this side of her head, so you can see the entire eye, which is really interesting. And then even though they're always going in a direction, like in some kind of with some kind of intention, but the shoulders would be like this normally, but the shoulders are square. Her head's over here, her eyes on the side of her face, and you notice she's got 2 left hands, right? So if there was like normal hands, then this side would be that way and this hand would be that way. Also 2 left feet, but sometimes like with the men, it's 2 right feet. So it's, you know, and these are just like very particular, very intentional decisions they made, which some expert Egyptologist out there could tell you probably more about why, but it's very difficult to even do that pose, right? But I think it really projects what the character, you know, the person who's being depicted or the god is being depicted, like their intention and what they're trying to do. And so we actually modeled some of that concept in our art style. So go to the next one. And yeah, so now we're getting into some of our art. So this is, it's not doing that at all, what I just said. So this is an example of where we don't always kind of follow that. This is Anubis, obviously, and it is the image you see in the back of Khonshu on our van. Driving down the road, it's like, I'm coming for you. It's great. And we use this a lot, because he's an important character in one of my favorite gods. Next. Yep, here he is coming. This is set with he's the head of the unknown animal, which is nobody knows what it was. It's some kind of aardvarky thing with weird ears, like not quite jackal, something like that. Nobody knows. It's the unknown animal, and which, by the way, is relevant to the Ordatude lore that all this is based on. The fact that it is unknown, there's reasons for that. And then he's coming through the wall here, and that's the Book of Gates over on the left, which I won't get too much into the lore because it'll suck up the whole time if I do that. I'm going to kind of focus more on the art. Let's go to the next one. I really didn't sort these in the order that I wanted to sort them in. Can you go to the slide sorter?
I can't. Not while we're streaming.
Okay, then just flip way ahead.
Yep.
Keep going.
Go.
Go. Wait, look back up. All right, so that's a good one. So here's an example of where we have modeled that style. And actually, the ones I think I'm looking for are at the end. I was going to sort these and never got around to it. So you notice this is Isis, and it's not, you can't see her feet because can you get out of presentation mode and just make it? No, you can't because you cropped her feet up, but it's doing the same thing, right? Her feet are both flat and pointing in a single direction, and her shoulders are square, but you see her face is, it's photorealistic. So we add some photorealistic elements to an addition. And also the background is very flat, almost like a 2D stage set. And so it was tricky for us to communicate what we wanted to all the artists. Go ahead and keep flipping until you get to the ones that have like the instructions. Keep going. All the way down. I think it's at the very end, actually. Sorry to do this, but we just didn't change.
You guys get a sneak peek.
Yeah, I get a sneak peek of all this stuff.
No,
where is it? Did you put them in?
No, don't see him.
Keep going.
Was,
at the very end.
This guy, I guess.
Keep going. Nope.
That was at the end.
No. Did we not drag them up there? Is that it? Is that everything?
That's it.
All right. Darn it. We don't have all the slides.
If you want to pull them up and send them to me really quick, we'll start slowly scrolling through these guys just to show off.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Go right back to the top and let me, because I'm pretty sure I put them in there.
I will just.
I did. It's called. It is in the. Did you download the folder? It's right here. I'm looking at it.
I'll upload a new one. Sorry, guys. Technical difficulties.
Yeah, it's live,
It's
just
this
the way.
is what happens when you do it live. So.
Yep.
This is also why we're not a production company.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet.
Even though we're called a thing production. So there's the link. Do you have it?
I got it. Yes. Open the new.
Click on that one. And go to slide 4. Yeah, you have the wrong one. Quickly, we've integrated a lot of the problems that you found. We're dropping more Easter eggs with more prizes in because we got to keep you guys digging around for those. And we're going to create an art gallery in there that will have all of your photography, all the best photos, screenshots that you've created, and a lot of the art from the book will be in an actual building, which we'll just pick a building, a big building like maybe the Embassy of Elan Royal in the Heshu district or some big building, and then you'll be able to go inside and all of the art will be in there hanging on the walls. Kind of like that painting of the original playtest group that's in the Rock and Troll Cafe in Trolltown. Next. And if you'd be looking at, please, if anybody has questions, because I don't have it up, so I can't do that. So this was part of the groundwork Lady X used to help create our color palette. So we wanted to make sure that the colors that were being used in these pieces were the kinds of colors they had available. And the kinds of colors that ancient Egyptians had available were based on what was available in nature. And so all of these pieces here are pieces that painted, created, sourced from museum works and wall art, and created this. This is a photograph of a color palette that she created to show not just the types of colors that were available, like lapis lazuli was a very common one, but also how the colors interact when they're shown side by side, which is an incredible level of detail and effort that she went through to create our style guide for the artists. And this was a big process, to produce all of this. Next.
These.
Yeah, so I think we already saw those. We saw that one. This is kind of typical. Yep, saw that. And I like how they carry the style of the art through to. This is one of the original pieces that was ever created. They carry the style of the art through to the carvings. It's like it's consistent. So this is one of our original pieces. This is sort of coming to Keshinar. Now you'll notice, interestingly, like there are some anachronisms in here. Like that Temple of Osiris. That is not what the new Temple of Osiris looks like, because this is based on the old city. The really old city that we had created in Blender before we trashed that and decided to reconstruct the entire place more to make it even more like civil engineering of Egyptian cities was, ancient Egyptian cities. And so we might touch over that if we wind up using this. But the front, the palace never changed, and the big statue of Colossus of Ra-Memnon in the harbor there. But the floating pillars are interesting, right? Because that was not really my idea. That was Andre's idea. Andre Dragomir, one of our original artists, the one who created this. And I was like, why'd you put all that floating bits of stuff all over? He's like, I don't know, it just looked cool. And then that got my mind racing, and I think I've talked about this on another live stream. That's how the Pillars of Memnon were born. The idea that when Memnon ascended, one of these floating obelisks just shot out of the palace, and people are like, what is that? And written on all the sides is basically the legacy of wisdom that he wanted to pass on to future generations is carved on that. Plus, it has a shred of his consciousness. So these things kind of act out the lazy dreams of ascended pharaohs. And sometimes they seem to act with intention, but most of the time they're just floating around trying to find good wind currents, because there are sort of pipe organ-like orifices carved through them that when they rotate, they make different notes. So it doesn't make that much music by itself, but when it's joined by others, then it can actually make really complicated, beautiful music. And so they're always flying around trying to find good wind to do that. And every once in a while, when they're really desperately needed, they can actually act in unison in a more intentional way. But for the most part, they're just sort of going around. But that's a great example of the collaboration between our artists and the writers. Is that the writers aren't the only ones creating interesting things here. Sometimes the artists have their own fundamental inspirations, which then impacts the way we craft the story, because they come up with ideas that we didn't have, that we then decide how it gets written in, around the buildings and just everything. Like they just draw stuff in that is their own inspiration, coming from their own creative inspiration. And then we look at that and go, well, we got to come up with some story for that. That's amazing. And that collaboration makes everything better, just like the collaboration with our Egyptologists, right? With Dr. Waller and other Egyptologists that we talk to. And that's why we go to conferences like ARCE, American Center for Research in Egypt, and sponsor those events and try to even submit papers, to kind of advance, archaeogaming, is because that collaboration and all those ideas that come from that and the presentations that we see, that all enriches what we're doing here. We made a very big intentional move when we started this project, not just to take the aesthetics of ancient Egypt, because sand, mummies, and pyramids does not an ancient Egyptian TTRP setting make, in our opinion, right? We're going super deep. So here's another piece by Andre Dragomir, but this is also based on the old city. So this is the necropolis, but you'll notice what's missing from this one is the giant colossus of Sekhmet, the giant statue of Sekhmet, the reclining sphinx like Sekhmet on top of that. Should be on top of there. So this is old, and that's okay, because Keshinar, right, changed over time. There was a past. And so maybe this was before that giant colossus was built, because it was built by stacking stone, not by carving it out of a single piece. And and then here's another one, a great example. So some of these are like historical, also like they're showing events in Keshinar's past. And this is just a really great one, showing some soul core there, guarding the walls and the pillars coming around. This is done by Jose. Jose is our illustrator, and his background is in architecture, so we also did. Darn, I wish I'd included some of that too. He did a lot of the elevation drawings for the different buildings. So we would give him sort of inspirational line drawing kind of stuff, and then he would create actual architectural elevations for each building. But we're going to have some of that in the book, just to kind of show kind of how we went about it. Like, we're going to dedicate pages to the art. So this is the 500 years ago when Apep's Mall. This is the Endless Night. Apep's Mall had this giant sinkhole that opened up, swallowing this building that Ur-Lakesh had built on top of it, and nobody knew exactly why. But then out of it came this horde of sort of fiends and undead kind of emanating from that hole. It almost destroyed the city, and it kind of took everybody rallying together to overcome that. They beat it off in the Temple of Isis, put guards and wards to protect anything from coming through. But you still have this endless sort of sinkhole in Apep's Maw that goes down to Duat, goes down, to wherever these nasty creatures came from. And now it's more like a tourist attraction. So you go there, and there's the Keshite, that the people that would, like, whatever you want destroyed, they'll carve it on a clay tablet. Oops, sorry. Yep, well,
Not a production studio.
Yep, live. We are live. So now you can buy those. They're called tablets of dissolution. You walk up on a little diving board thing and throw them down into Apep's Maw. So anything that you want destroyed in your life, you just pay a couple of coppers, and they'll build these for you, and you can have it destroyed. And like there's kind of frowned on, but you can also make little figures and images of people. They're like an enemy. It's a little kind of dark. So maybe you have to find the right person to be willing to do that for you. I already talked about this piece. Keep going. Oh, so this is another one that I think is a perfect illustration of the kind of artistic style that we were creating. I love how the rays of Ra emanating from his diadem, some of them's going in front of Thoth, some's going behind. They sort of have that like, I'm here to do a thing, that sort of like directionality in their posture. And then you have tablets of Solanite, in the front, and Ra Memnon has got a phoenix feather and a little vial of phoenix blood there, because phoenix blood, if you've played through Perfect Trap, you'll know is most powerful substance in the universe, has the power to bend reality to its will. It's like a vial of liquid wish spells, and that's what he's using to actually sign the covenant. I already did this one. Keep going. Did that. This one is one of my favorites, and also talks about how inspiration for how the artists help inspire the story itself. So this was done by Jose. Well, first it was done by Ren. So Antoine Ren is one of our fantastic artists that has done so many of these scenes that you've just seen were him. And so he created this one. And then Yelze kind of did a little bit more tweaks in the background and what have you. But this is an idea that I had that is one of my favorites, and it's part of the story in the video. You've got your bard pleading for his life there to Anubis, doing the 42 negative confessions, trying to convince him that he lived a good life. Anubis looks a little skeptical. But then here's the bard's friend in the back, the rogue, sneaking up to just put a little extra weight on the feather of Ma'at's side of the scale to try and help him out. Oh, but the thing I wanted to point out here is you see the pillars of Memnon in the back, and you see how they have chains on them, and they're kind of cracked and like fiery red stuff coming through. This is a thing that Yelze contributed. He just stuck them in there, and I was like, why would there be pillars of Memnon in Duat? Well, of course there would be for the fallen pharaohs, the pharaohs. So then that added the concept to the lore that if the pharaoh doesn't pass their tests in Duat when they ascend because they've been corrupted by power or wealth, then they stay there and become devils of Set, part of his dominion, fighting the endless war against Apep. And then their pillar explodes and then reappears, but with chains on it and the cracks in Duat. So cool. An idea that's his entirely, and Yelze didn't even realize what he was doing when he created that. But it caused the writers to be like, wow, let's create some incredible lore around that. Okay, next. That's more of the original of the piece, of the set piece. Go ahead. This is from Dariush, and it's another version of kind of Set coming through the wall. It's a little bit monster porny for us, so like I love his work. His work is amazing. He's done the most incredible work on our monsters, but we didn't really wind up using this or going with it, even though it's really good. Now this one we certainly did. So this is Antoine Ren. This is his Sekhmet, and this is the original piece that you see in the video also, which all with Rigon, who is our video producer. He had a host of artists that spent months rigging these characters so that we could animate them for that video, and was thousands of hours worth of work so that they can actually move and create that movement. But there was a whole host of like different artists that would cut these 2D images into pieces, and then each individual piece of the character had to be rigged and animated using Spine 2D, and then creating these sequences, with the music from our composer, Michael Quiroz. And then this is a fantastic Osiris piece, which you've seen, obviously, because it's the main piece of the Kickstarter campaign image. And then here is Set at the head of the Mesektet, which is the solar bark of Ra, chasing Apep across the sky. And if you'll notice, there are like planets and stars in Apep's mouth, and like what's going on with that. There are Easter eggs everywhere in our art that allude to the greater story of kind of what's happening. We have to constantly refrain ourselves from not giving away too much too early. And then we talked about this one, which is which was Andre, not Dragomir, different Andre, who created this piece, which is really beautiful. That kind of has that real fresco quality about it. I love it. Oh, and this is Bastet. So this is back to Ren, and this is we had to, when we selected our initial pantheon of 33 gods, and we will be making more, we had to be real selective about which ones to include, because everybody has their favorite Egyptian gods. And please keep chiming in on the Discord about which ones you like and which ones you miss not having in this initial setup. Doesn't mean that the DM can't just make it happen. I can just include whatever god you want. But the ones that we created the lore for, with the entreaties and descriptions, and the temples, like actually architecturally designing, 3D modeling, and placing the temples in Unreal, and then creating the lore around the temples, like who are the Ratharans, or the priests of that temple, and what are their names, and what is the relationship with the other temples. Like, it's a lot of work to make one of the gods happen in Keshinar. And part of the Egyptian gods, as you know, are complex. Like, they're big personalities, and not all of them are the god of a thing, right? Like an Osiris, god of the earth and the underworld. That can be true. And it also depends on when, the timeline in which they were worshipped. So some people ask us, like, well, what timeline of Egyptian history are you using? Well, it kind of slides around, right? Because Keshinar is 3,000 years old, 3,300 years old, just like Egypt kind of persisted for that long. But it's been influenced by the fact that the magic is super available, and it's even more complex, right? Because it's 5e magic, and people can cast spells, and like young people, especially young women, sorceresses can come in to be able to cast a spell when they're very young, and so it's like magic is super common, right? And also the gods are a little more meddlesome, like they make regular appearances, and there's people go to Duat, but because of divine magic, they come back, right? So we've never had that experience, at least not in a kind of like way that's super verifiable. People have their own after death experiences or near death experiences, but in Keshinar you can go go to Duat and then actually be resurrected. And so it's common knowledge that the afterlife exists and and how it works. But with Bast, one interesting thing, a bit of lore about her, if you back up just real quick. So so we had to pick for each god, like, what are they the god of? And so with Bast, we said she's the god of secrets, and amongst other things. So it's secrets and protection and exorcism. So if you have, this is a really cool piece of lore that Marx came up with. If a piece of knowledge is forgotten by all living mortals, then it becomes her domain, becomes her property. She's the only one that knows it. And so then that is one of the reasons why she uses cats, because she's the god of cats. It's because cats aren't people, so per se. They don't count in that. So like she can use cats to act out certain intentions based on the fact that she has this hidden knowledge. So one of the things that we're including in the game is the secrets of Bast cards, and that's what that is. Like, players don't like to take notes all the time, right? Some players are note takers, some aren't. And I fall into the same trap. I get it. Nobody wants to be like, you want to play, right? You don't want to be like constantly writing notes. So what we did is we created all these interesting secrets and plot points and things that you learn as you go through the campaign. We have cards for them. So then the DM can say, okay, well, now you've learned this secret, this thing, and then it can move it to a sleeve, and like then you'll always have that available. Those are your notes. So you hand that to the party, and then if you're around the table, or even digitally through your VTT, you can flip through them and go like, what was that guy's name again, or what was that thing, and you'll have it right there in those Secrets of Bast cards. So that's just a nice way to kind of facilitate the whole understanding the difference between what you know and what you don't know as a party, and being able to reference back to it very easily. So that's what that's all about. So next one, another piece that's beautifully in that style that we were looking for, also by Antoine Ren. And you can notice that very kind of like 2D simplified background. Love the lapis lazuli, almost stained glass-like wings of, this is Madra, the magic. She's part of the Hexarch Council, which is the kind of like there used to be a vizier in Keshinar, but then there was too much centralized power. So the Pharaoh decided to make it a council of 5, which happens to be the same number of star points on the Cebu star, right? With a little circle in the middle, and that's the pharaoh. So that's how he emanates his power through this, through these stars into the Hexar Council. That's one of the way we've integrated kind of the lore, you see. And so she's the magic. She's the high priest of Isis. Love how the cat is one of her eyes, and her eye is just fantastic. It's on the side of the van too, on the side of Khonshu. And there's another rendition of it, but also I think it's beautifully done by, you're not seeing the whole piece here, it's just a cutout, but I like the whole piece better. And you can see like her legs and how it's really adopting that 2D style. This is by Yulia, and got the Cebu stars I was just talking about, right? There in the background. Interestingly, the hieroglyphic for Dawad is simply a Cebu with a circle around it, so it's a Cebu that's contained. Like, because the Cebu can mean stars, it can mean an individual, it can represent a breath, a person, and then with a circle around it represents Dawad. Okay, next. Okay, then we got some brilliant god images. This was done by Yulia, and then it was touched up with Liana, who's another one of our amazing illustrators in Poland, and she's absolutely incredible. So this one is one of my favorites. This is Ta, done by also by Yulia, and is a pure homage to the Ta in Deities and Demigods, the old Deities and Demigods. Like, we kind of started with that, redrew it by hand, but to keep it very similar, because I just love that original piece of art from Deities and Demigods. These are all cropped, unfortunately, but this is set, pictographically in Duat. That's his pyramid of Super Meru in the background, and kind of the River of Souls flows into that. If you see the whole piece, then you can see the river. And there's kind of Apep in the background. So his job now is to marshal the forces of Duat, of the underworld, to keep Apep and the spawn of Apep at bay, to keep them from trying to destroy everything. And Super Meru is the city that Set was worshipped in, right? When Set wasn't always a bad guy. Like, his reputation kind of morphed over time. He was the god of the Western Desert before he was the god of like vengeance and darkness, and he was worshipped in Super Meru in that city. And I've actually just asked Dr. Walder to kind of dig into that more, because Set's a key character in Keshnar. There's a lot of conspiracies in Keshnar. Conspiracies are real. Not everything's the way it seems. The way that the story that you're fed may not be always based on reality, and the grand arc of narrative of what's really going on in the universe will unravel as you level up and as you uncover these secrets. Next. But that's how we represented, that's where the name for Super Meru came from that city that he was worshipped in actual ancient Egypt, and when he was less of a big bad guy and was actually actively worshipped. So this is Toth, another great piece, also cropped, which, darn it. But I just love the style, showing the ibis there, and Djibouti was his other name. And then there's another version of Anubis with Amit there on the left. We'll put links to these actual images too, because these are all cropped. They're all cropped in half, unfortunately.
We've already given all the ones that were cropped.
We're going to put them all in there, yeah.
Yep.
This is actually not. This one I find it a little bit too My Little Pony kind of, but it's this is Khonshu, and so some of these may not make it into the book, but it's still a beautiful piece. It was done by Yulia. And now this one I really love. So that's a Kematusk. So that's the primary beast of burden in Keshnar. It's not, because they didn't have horses until the Hittites invaded in ancient Egypt. So this is a cross between kind of a horse, a camel, and a elephant, right? So it's got the strength and power of an elephant. It's got the tusks, but it also has the prehensile prehensile proboscis, what do you call it on an elephant? The nose thing? Trunk. Thank you. Yeah. Trunk of an elephant, but shorter, and but they also have fur, to help maintain the moisture, and they also have the fat sacs, because camels don't store water in their hump. It's just a giant fat portion which stores both water and energy that they kind of use, and so these guys have pads like that around their body that do the same thing. So really interesting creature, and there's Ra-Memnon on the back, fighting off the spawn of Apep. But that is just Gega is the name of this artist, and we just love that whole thing. And so this is wall art in the original tomb of Ra-Memnon, the abandoned tomb of Ra-Memnon, which is empty because his remains were transferred to the Great Pyramid of Memnon, which is a gigantic white pyramid out in the Plains of Osiris. But if you go into his tomb, that's actually there. And that's the kinds of things that we're going to be doing when we expand on the 2D city, is putting that empty tomb in there so you can go down into it and look at the art in the walls and what have you. That project, it was enormous, right? It took 4 years and like 5 people to build that whole thing. So it was, it's something that we're going to continue to develop. And we wanted to see to what extent people engage with it, the players and the DMs engage with that 3D city before we decide how much more money to sink into it, right? So this was done by, all of this is done by Jose, who is our lead illustrator. And the Sand Dragon, which is actually an elemental, but it takes the form of dragons because it finds it's more effective because the Keshites are terrified of dragons because Apep is like a dragon, right? It's basically inspiration for early dragons. So they tend to like distrust dragons very intensely. And so these elementals, they take that form because they're in a Catharan desert and the dry lightning, with Cathara being the goddess of lightning, and they're the constant spider lightning that happens, but only when it's not raining, which is basically all the time. They actually breathe lightning also. So very interesting creature. Jose did an incredible job of like making that dragon look like it's made out of sand, which is a big deal. That's also on the side of Conchu. It's one of our favorite pieces. And then he just redrew the city yet again for the 10th time in great detail to show it on the right as the dragon approaching. This is directly off the side of Conchu, our van. And now we're getting into some of Dariush's work. Dariush does monsters like nobody's business. It's incredible. Like, they're terrifying and awesome. This is a sewer harpy. Do a quick time check here. I think we're doing good. Sewer harpies, which, so this was Andrew, who was one of our writers. He came up, he's like, we were just coming up with ideas for monsters, especially sewer creatures, because this extensive sewer system that runs underneath that Mop Hotep talks about, in the video, in the Kickstarter, the extensive sewer system, it's filled with critters, and so when Ra-Memnon 3,000 years ago came to the Delta, it was filled with like this sort of abominations of Apep, right? So there's like creatures that have worshipped Apep that slowly get perverted and chaotic over time, people, whatever, any species. Then there's also a spawn of Apep, which is different. They're kind of directly of him and very different. But these were some of the creatures that were worshiping him, and got mutated into these horrible things. And so most of them were kind of just killed or beaten off into the sea by Memnon and his host of Memnonites, when they arrived in the Delta. But some of them went down, right? So down through the Mesa and deep caverns and fled and stayed there and kind of went into this sort of chrysalis phase. And then they come out every once in a while, like every 20 years, every 100 years. And they, instead of hunting actively, they actually draw people down into the sewers by making it sound like they're like children trapped down there, and by imitating the sounds of people that are calling for help. And so then you go down there and try to rescue them, and then they eat you, right? So tricky dudes. This is Eternal Brother. This was done by Dariush. And so these are like the Armored Duskers, except they have their soul in them intentionally. So they were like 20th level paladins that decided to serve Osiris in perpetuity rather than dying and passing and ascending, going to Eru. And instead become these, so they're actually lawful good. They don't look like it, right? But they have this undead flair to them. And they are the eternal guardians. There's only 33 of them because the gem required to make this happen, it was by this wizard called Lidifer. And he only made 33 of them. And there's like fragments of them, but there aren't any new ones. And so that gem contains their soul. And then they have the sort of lick-like body. But they're very powerful. They maintain all of their abilities as a paladin. And there's only 33 of them, and they guard the necropolis. So instead of having like the ancient Egyptian pharaohs actually would create tombs and hide them, right? So sometimes they probably in pyramids were some tombs there, but also they would create tombs that were like down, right? Like there's a shaft that went down into the desert and be covered by sand and hidden. But every single one of them, except for the only one I think that we found, and we found a few actually, but the pharaonic one we found is King Tut, right? And Carter found it, and that one was hidden. It was kind of next to another tomb, and so it was like artfully hidden, and so we were able to find that one, which is great. There are other tombs of noble peoples that we've uncovered that have been even recently uncovered. I think in Saqqara there might have been one, but but they're all rated. So within like a couple of decades of these tombs being created, especially I think during the first intermediate period, especially, like they were all just completely raided. So when we find them thousands of years later, they're empty because everything's been stolen already. So rather than do that in Keshnar, Raskandari made the decision, like, instead of creating pyramids and burying, hiding stuff around, which there are some of those that did happen for a while, but then they created one big fortress, which is underneath the Sekhmet statue, the giant Sphinx of Sekhmet, right? And her temple is behind it, but underneath of that is the necropolis, which is one giant fortified structure with all the remains of all the pharaohs. And they also don't take all their wealth with them because they don't have bankrupt the kingdom every time they ascend, right? So they can fill 133-foot long messeket or bark, like based on kind of like the raw one, with whatever wealth they want to take with them into the afterlife. And then they hide that, they lock it up into the necropolis, and then astral versions of that go with them. And so as long as those aren't disturbed, then those astral versions of them stay active, and that's why it's so important to keep them on. So Eternal Brothers are guarding that stuff. So here's another fantastic piece, one of our favorite monsters. You might have heard the Grumpy Dungeon Masters podcast. They were talking about this and how Marx created the mechanics for this. And the idea, this is a Mirage Demon. So this is a kind of like an amalgam Borg-like creature of evil in the Catharan Desert. And it lives off of moisture, and so the way that it attracts prey is it makes itself look like an oasis, but it's casting illusion to do that. So you're going through the desert, you're thirsty, you're hungry, you see this beautiful oasis with this little spring of crystal clear water and date palms and boy, everything you need, right? And then as you approach, then it reveals its true nature and starts to lure you in and suck all the moisture out of your body. And it does it through the new fatigue mechanic in 5e, because like the 2014 fatigue mechanic was like complicated, hard to remember all the different things. The 2024 one is a lot cleaner, a lot easier to implement, and fits in beautifully with this monster. This is how this monster uses that. And then if it does succeed in draining all the moisture and killing its prey, then the face of that victim shows up on its body there like that. And so this is another one. This was done by Andre, the same one that did that beautiful Isis fresco. And it is Kamala, and she's a banshee. So she's got a whole backstory, which I don't want to give anything away, so I won't say much about it. But in Trolltown, there's a house that's abandoned that they've tried to sell, they've tried to rent, but everybody that winds up trying to live there kills themselves. Because it's haunted by this creature, Kamala. But she's sort of benign in that she's trapped in this mirror. And so that's the only thing in the house right now is it's this mirror. And so you can go there, and if you offer her an offering, which is tell her your worst fear, but you got to be honest about it, and she'll know if you're not telling her your worst fear, then she will tell you how you die. And I've come up with a mechanic where this actually plays out in a really interesting way. So, because that's one of the danger zones of D&D is time travel, right? Got to watch out with the time travel, or predicting things that may or may not happen. We've come up with a mechanic that works. And here's Dariush's take. He's done a couple of different takes on the Duskers. There's two kinds of Duskers. There's you can sort of volunteer your body for science, right? And then you can serve Keshnar. In the afterlife, your soul goes to Aru or to Wat, depending on whether you're a good or bad person, but your body gets used for either a sanitation dusker, depending on the quality of your remains, or a armored dusker. So the armored ones have metal bolted on, welded onto their skeletal frame for reinforcement and make them tougher. And the sanitation ones just spend all their time, cleaning up the streets, taking out the garbage. You can have your own personal ones, to walk your dog or babysit your kids or, whatever. And that's what Mop-Hotep is. He poor guy had his soul somehow got trapped, didn't get dispatched. But he wasn't dead yet when he was made into a Dusker, and now he's stuck being one for thousands of years, which makes him one of the oldest entities in Keshnar with the attitude to boot. And so you'll see a lot of Mop-Hotep as we go along. He was the original NPC from our playtest. Okay, next. And this is the Shaketi, which are the sort of Anubis-inspired species with the disproportionately creepy long arms, and they can walk on all fours, and they can walk on bipedally, and they can seamlessly transition from bipedal gait into a all fours gait, which is super creepy and actually is sort of one of their abilities to kind of freak people out. A lot of the judges of the Court of Anubis are Shaketi. And this is the Astenu, the baboon creatures. This was this done by Ren or Dariush? One or the other. The artists are also good. And Yep, and here's an armored dusker versus a sanitation dusker. You can see the difference. The armored one is like ready to rumble. Sanitation one's ready to take your trash out. Oh, here's another fantastic piece. It was done by Yulia, one of our first ever artists. Has kind of been with us for 4 years now, creating stuff. And this is Tramples His Enemy. So if you've done any of our playtests of our one shots at any of the cons, you'll have met Tramples, and he's an officer of the Mafdet Centurion Guard. Centaurs are not native to Keshnar. He came in for they've traveled in because they were inspired through a dream that was delivered by Mafdet. Interesting part of lore having to do with Romenos and the deprivation, which I won't get into because I've only got 5 minutes. But beautiful representation of that art style that we were seeking, where two-dimensionality, kind of flat, but using light and some photorealistic elements incorporated in it. So again, we didn't do that for all of our art because we thought it would have been too hampering. We want some just monsters like the Darius has done, just like right there. And you can see them sort of in 3D, but there are several pieces that really do kind of represent that style that we were looking for, that we're pretty proud of. And this is one of them. Any more?
Oh, yes.
And any questions?
I've not got any questions.
Go ahead. No questions yet? Okay.
Oh,
this is worth noting. So we created this 3D city, right? One of the reasons we did it initially, like when we had the old Blender version, is so that we could create any kind of visual scene of the city that we want for art. But the problem is the screenshots from those wind up looking like it's a video game, because it kind of is. Even though we built the whole thing by hand, it looks like a video game because it's an Unreal Engine, and that's what video games look like. And so in order to make the art match the rest of the art in the book, what we've done is we had the original, one of our original artists, Bella, from Hungary, who did all of the 3D modeling of the original city. When we built the new city with Mitch and Masterwork Studios and Yas and Miguel and that team, which took like a year to just scrap and rebuild the whole thing, and with Jose doing the illustrations and other artists contributing ideas for building styles, we would take a screenshot like this one. So this is an actual screenshot of just looking down on Apeps Mall, which if you're alpha testing the beta right now, you can go and actually just see this. Take your own screenshot of it. But then Bella came back in and overpainted it and added all kinds of detail, right? So just use that screenshot of that original, but yes, 3D modeled CG piece that we created in the city, and then completely overpainted it with individual brush strokes and added lighting effects and birds and junk in the streets and like dirt and on the walls and all that stuff to make it, look like it belongs with the rest of our art in the book. And there's about 20 of those that we have right now, and it takes them like a month to do every one, or 6 weeks. This piece is done by Dragomir again, also very original. That's a Dua. So the Duas are all over the city. They're fed by the Anket Aqueduct. And because, the Reth, the Keshites are obsessed with cleanliness. It's one of the 5 tenets of Reth. Kind of the guidance they live by is that you keep yourself clean, and because the ancient Egyptians were obsessed with cleanliness. And with magic, it's easy. You got hot water all the time, from like permanent spells cast on flame spells, and so then everybody in the city has access to these bathhouses, which are all over the city. If you've gone into 3D, you can see them everywhere, and everybody's equal, when they're in the bathhouse. And so then this is a nice aerial view of the Palace District, and you've got Temple of Osiris there on the left. You can tell the new one, not the one that looked like a church with steeples on it, but this is actually the original design that's based on ancient Egyptian styles. Like if you look at the Temple of Edfu, that obviously, and Karnak and Luxor, like those styles really informed the civic layout, how we architected the city, and also the individual buildings themselves. They all have that sort of like pillars, trapezoidal sort of motif going on, very heavy, very strong, powerful, kind of fundamental shapes. And then we extrapolated a little, just to kind of say, well, okay, we have magic and goes on over time. How's it look any different? You also notice that the water, that's Cor Linthor Bay, which is kind of shallow, and so the water is very beautiful, kind of like the Caribbean. You get these dramatic changes in color based on the depth, and the Unreal Engine captures that. It's absolutely amazing. This whole piece is a little red for me. And this is this is the Garden Caldera. They've got the Father Tree, which was a gift from Geb, and they were going through the desert, one of the biggest things in a city. And this is a view from the top of the Rock and Roll Cafe. Those characters could probably use a little more brush strokey stuff to kind of make them deviate from, you know, the 3D characters that they replaced there originally. And this is the view of the necropolis now. So this, unlike the last one that you saw, had the pyramids and everything, but didn't have the giant monolith of Colossus of Sekhmet, healer and goddess of healing and harm. And but now it does, and so this is kind of like the new version of it. And there's that one entrance that you have to guard. A lot easier when you're stacking all the treasures of the pharaohs in one place to guard it. So yeah, getting done on time. And is that it?
There's several more.
Go ahead, flip through them. We got a minute. That's a close-up of the one that we already showed, a different version.
Different palace.
That go back. That's amazing.
Okay.
So like this just goes to show that all the extra work that Bella does when he does these overpaints by adding like weather and people and all that doesn't look like a screenshot, you know, from the 3D world. Next, same thing for this one. This is the Solinar Canal coming out of the Great Pyramid of Memnon, looking towards the city. I love this view. It's just fantastic. And so there are temples down in that canal. And this is the top of the Temple of Shu. You can see the roost there where the talons of Horus and the couriers of Shu, you know, that they kind of live up in there and kind of operate out of there, and the birds, and it's just fantastic. And then this is the Catharan Desert. So this was done by an artist named Django, who did a couple of pieces for us, but this is the main one, which you've also animated this. You see it in the video with the lightning animated that Regan, our video producer, produced. And there's Kematusk. And you know, and that is that thing coming off of the Kematusk is lightning nets. So that is how they figured out over the centuries to safely traverse the Catharan Desert, because the Catharan Desert has that lightning happening all the time, right? Like continuously. And so by using those lightning nets, and it goes down into kind of like a plow-like object, that becomes an attractant, because they're made out of solanite, which you find little beads of it on the surface of the desert. Somehow the solanite is coming up in fingers through the desert, being attracted by this lightning, right? And so Inara is the goddess of the desert, Cathar is the goddess of lightning. They used to be one god, and they were split into two. So get it, cathode, anode, and so they're attracted to each other. And so then little superheated beads of solanite appear in the desert, but they're hard to go collect because we're not getting electrocuted. But then they figured out, you know, the lightning riders figured out, okay, well, if you make these devices, then you're going to get struck eventually. And you can always tell a lightning rider, they have that Lichtenberg scars on them, the fern-like scars that you get when you get struck by lightning. And so it's kind of a badge of honor. And there's different kinds of lightning, all different kinds. Like there's one giant bolt called the Fist of Cathara, which you have zero chance of surviving. And then when people hear that, they hear words in it, you know, in some kind of like in Celestial, which is like Cathara saying something. But that allows the lightning riders to kind of safely traverse this maze of lightning and find the solanite, right? And then they make the nets out of that metal because it's super, super conductive. It's also what the tablets of the Covenant are made out of. Saw that one already. Oh, this is another one done by Dragomir, which is great. This is the interior of the temples, and somebody pointed out that like all the temples are functional, right? So the Temple of Thoth is the great library of Thoth, the largest single depository of knowledge on Orthain. And and there's also like a silent spell cast, so the human voices of peoples of all species is suppressed. But so you hear books dropping and quills on paper, but you don't hear the voices. And so this is and also there's this giant mechanical clock in there, which is really interesting, called the Eye of Ma'at, which is that giant heavy ball. And so it's like a Fulcrum's pendulum, right? That is tracking the movement of Orthain in its rotation, and because it's considered sacrilegious to tell time by the raw Ratharans. It's considered sacrilegious to tell time in any other way than with the sunlight, right? So there's very few actual mechanical clocks, which, by the way, the ancient Egyptians invented. They invented the sundial, and which is great, except doesn't work at night. And so then they invented the water clock, which uses these bowls and water going from one to the next, so they could tell time, you know, when you don't have direct sunlight. But in the places where Nick's flagging me to shut up, but I got one more thing.
That's all the pictures we got.
And what's that?
That's just all the artwork we have.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks. And but one thing they do to create to be able to focus the sunlight is you can use a petrified basilisk eye, and so that is kind of like uxalite. You know, it's a real gem, which because it's all going in a single direction. Like if light hits it from anywhere, it focuses it and directs it. So that's one of the ways that they can create if it's really overcast, or even, you know, with the stars, if you use it in a certain way, you can focus enough light to be able to tell the time. And yeah, so that's it for the artwork. And I think I've probably given you a flavor of like just how much effort has gone into this. We have hundreds and hundreds of pieces. We probably are not going to use. We're probably going to use 50% of it in the books, because you saw in the last podcast, you know, how much content we have. In fact, here it is. My prop. This is the amount of content that we have produced so far without art. So just the setting book is enormous. This is double paged. It'll collapse a little bit, you know, because we use a smaller font when as we go into layout now, which we're doing right now. But then when we add the art, it'll beef back up again. So the setting book is going to be huge. This is after cutting a bunch of stuff. But all the stuff that we cut, we're just going to use in later ones. Like I was talking about the gods, the 33 gods. We have a whole Egyptian Pantheon supplement expansion that's planned for having a whole bunch of new gods. So tell us the ones you want, and we'll try to get them included in the future with all these different elements that make them sort of complete, right? They have their temple, they have their physical temple in a 2D city, and all those things. You know, and here's our mechanics, and here's the Book of Gates, and this is without art. So, you know, the material is ready to go. Now we're in sort of refinement, making sure all the mechanics are tight, but we had to wait for the SRD. So Mark's is working on all the mechanics, and that was the SRD looks really good. And so yeah, we're going to start working on all of that. Question?
We got one question.
Yeah, question.
There are two types of Duskers we've seen, armored and sanitation. Are there any other kinds?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. There aren't any other kinds, but there are the Eternal Brothers, right? And so the Eternal Brothers are basically like an armored Dusker, except that their soul is in them, because in these Leaderford gems, which is this ability, this device you can use to capture your soul, and then use it to animate a Dusker body. Except the Dusker body was made from a high-level paladin or a high-level worshiper of Osiris, and so that's how they become these kind of eternal, really powerful warriors to guard Keshite in its moments of most dire need, and also to guard the necropolis, because so the pharaohs have access to all of that astral versions of all the things they take with them into the afterlife to help with their final tests and whatever their missions they have in the afterlife. So there's really those three kinds. People have also asked how they want to play Duskers, and we've had that request more than once. And so we're probably going to create a one-shot where you can do that, where everybody can be a party of Duskers, or maybe even Eternal Brothers. So if they're super powerful, we'll figure it out. But that's a fun thing, a fun concept. Even though Duskers have no soul, why not? Or maybe there are 5 like Mapotep that have got their soul stuck in them, and now you've got some kind of mission you have to perform. We'll come up with something, and we'll create a one-shot where you can play Duskers, which will be really good. All right. Well, thanks for that amazing question. Thank you for tuning in. It's always a pleasure to talk to everybody. If you're interested in, well, first of all, tell your friends, right? We're so close to 400,000, which is great. That gets us kind of real close to like break-even point for like what we've invested up to this point. It doesn't matter though. We are fully committed. If we're finishing this project, all 3 books, no matter what, that's just guaranteed to happen. But your support is so meaningful to us, because that's what it's all about. We're not building this to make money. We're building it to get it out to you, and to put this in your hands, because there are 2,300 people that we've been able to connect with that really want a super deep, complex, authentic, ancient Egyptian themed 5e setting, and that is really specific, but that is what we've created. And we're super gratified that we've had so much support from you guys, and for you believing in us. So it's wonderful. And if you want to play test, if you're a DM and you have a party and you want to play test this stuff, it will be going into play test within months, so that we can get feedback before we completely lock it down. Like, I've been playtesting this stuff for decades, right? But we want to playtest the final PDF. So we're going to do it in 2 phases. We're going to playtest just the unlaid out version. Then we're going to create some playtests for the final PDF that will go to the printer, to make sure that any glitches or misunderstandings or things that we've missed, errors, problems, that will be the playtesters will find it. And we'll create incentives for everybody who participate in that process. So if that's something you want to do, reach out to me, raw-memnon@orthane.com, or find me on the Wrath Discord, and we will, get that going on. And so now now we're in the fun part, right? So now that the Kickstarter is coming to an end, we're kind of looking forward to that because we will be able to focus all of our time on just finishing up the writing, getting the layout done, really just tightening up the the tome that we've already created, finishing up the mechanics and getting it all into your hands. And most of the physical stuff, like the dice and the Panopic jars and everything, most of that stuff is done and it's in our warehouse and ready to go. So, which is really good that we did that because of tariffs. So tariffs aren't really impacting us that much because I spent the last, year and a half just making and manufacturing and buying all the stuff that we needed that would be part of the Kickstarter. So we didn't wait on that, and boy, did that turn out to be a good decision. So tariffs really screwed us in terms of shipping and fulfillment, but they didn't in terms of the materials because we already have it all. And there's very few things other than the things that we're printing, like our minis, like Sand Dragon, for instance, right here. Those all have to be printed, but that's happening as we speak. So we're in really good shape in terms of delivering everything. And playtesting will be an important element of that. So thank you for coming today. We'll do other live streams as we move on, like, at least once a month, if not more. And, as we hit kind of like, big milestones, we'll put that out. And when we start the playtesting, we'll have a group too to just support the DMs and answer their questions.
Late backing and post.
Right. So people are also asking about late backing. Late backing is enabled. So if you couldn't afford to get in during this time, you wanted to back later, or if you have friends that learn about it later, then you can go into so we have a partnership with BackerKit, and you can go into the BackerKit store, which will be up and running. Mark has done a great job of pulling that together and working with BackerKit and their developers. And we kind of fixed a lot of the shipping issues with that. So now we're using shipping, much, much lower shipping costs, which we've negotiated with one of our fulfillment agents. And there's a couple that we're talking to. We're pretty sure who we're going to use, but I won't mention the name until we have like ink on paper. But they're big fulfillment houses located, outside the U.S. that can get us really great shipping prices, which are dramatically less than the ones that we quoted. Those are obviously estimates. We didn't mean to collect all the shipping in advance. It just wound up happening that way. But in the end of the day, it's a win-win for our backers because if the shipping is less, you can either spend that money on something else or we will refund it to you. And if the shipping is more, which you never know, taxes and VAT and all that, tariffs and all that nonsense, if it's more or the shipping costs just go up, then we will eat it, right? So no matter what, we will make $0. We'll make negative money on shipping, and all those benefits will be passed on to you guys because, again, our primary objective is to get all this in your hands and to get you playing it. And so then in 2 weeks after the close of the Kickstarter, you'll get a survey also where you can adjust your pledge. And so if you pledged, $90 Fist of Cathara, then you can rework that any way that you like. And you can, and the same thing for all of them. And so there's, I think that in that case, like the shipping may get deferred and then you pay it later if you change it. But again, it's always, we're guaranteed to try to keep the shipping as cheap as possible. And yeah, so it's, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys no less than 2-3 weeks, I think. We'll come up with another interesting topic to have a live stream for. So until then, thank you. And